Welcome to the Crochet Challenge for Warm Up America 2024. This is the tutorial that you've been waiting for, and I can't wait for you to get started. Now I will say, this is going to be a longer than usual tutorial, and that's because we have crocheters of all levels working on this challenge. So I have timestamps in the description below. I encourage you to use those. Or if you're somewhat new to crochet and you need more step-by-step, just follow the tutorial from start to finish. That's what it was designed for. Now, if this is the first time you're hearing about the challenge, I encourage you to check out my last video. That'll tell you everything about the challenge, what it is, why we do it, who the blankets are going to this year. Basically everything you need to know about the challenge is in that video, as well as the challenge homepage. I'll have that one linked in the description, and all of your questions will be answered. Now, you've probably already ordered your yarn, and you know generally what colors are going to go where in the pattern, but if you haven't done this step, you want to do this first. There's a color planner page that you can download. Use that sheet to plan out where you're going to put your contrast colors, and have that kind of in mind before you start crocheting any of the elements of the blanket. Now, you do not have to create the same color pattern structure that I have in my blanket, and I actually encourage you to be as creative as you want to be. The cool part about this project is you don't have to crochet it all in the same order. You can jump around a little bit and do what is fun for you at the moment, or what works for you at the moment. The squares are really small and portable, so they're great for on-the-go situations. And while I will present them in a specific order here in the tutorial, just know that you don't have to crochet it exactly as I'm presenting it, if that makes sense. So no matter how you choose to crochet this blanket, you will need to start with the spiral squares first. There's two different ways you can start the first round of the spiral, and it really just depends on what is easiest for you. The first option I'll show you is with a chain. This is the simplest and easiest way to go. So you'll make your slip knot, make 2 chains, and then in the first chain, you'll just half double crochet 8 times. And that's what the first round will look like. Now, if you're a little more advanced and you like working with the magic ring, you can do the magic ring as well. And same thing, you'll crochet 8 half double crochets in the magic ring. From here, we don't need to join. We're actually going to spiral, and that is pretty critical to how the spirals work. So find your first stitch. Got it right here. And this time we're going to work just in the back loop. So we have the front loop here, the back loop. I'll make a half double crochet in the first stitch here, just using the back loop, and then mark that stitch with some kind of stitch marker, just so you know that this is the first stitch of the round. And the stitch pattern for the second round is pretty simple. We need to increase for every stitch, which means we're going to make 2 half double crochets in every stitch. So while we're crocheting just in the back loops only, we're leaving the front loops exposed. That's actually the foundation for the little elevated parts of the spiral, so that's where we'll work those stitches. So at the end of round 2, you should have 16 stitches if you've done everything correctly. Same thing as before, we're not joining, so we can remove our stitch marker and make a half double crochet in that next stitch, which is the first stitch of round 3. And then mark that with your stitch marker. So this is the new first stitch. Go ahead and make another half double crochet in the same stitch. So we've got 2 in the first one here. And this time, just make 1 half double crochet in the next. followed by 2. So the pattern for this round is increase, not increase, increase, not increase. So we've got 2, 1, 2. We'll make 1 half double crochet. Now when you get to the last couple of stitches, the second to last should have your 2, and the last stitch should have just 1 half double crochet. And the last check you can do is count your stitches. You should have 24 total at the end of this round. Now moving on to round 4, we're following the same general trend here. Remove your stitch marker, half double crochet in the back loop of that stitch, and we'll increase here as well. So make another half double crochet in that stitch. Now this time, instead of doing 1 half double in between your increases, we'll do 2. So we've got our increase here. We'll half double crochet once in the next 2 stitches and then increase again. And so the last 2 stitches should be your 3 and 4, right? It should be your 1 half double crochet. Now that's all there is to the base of the spiral. From here, we'll add on the little extra layers, but before we do that, we need to do a quick gauge check. We want to make sure all of these blankets are roughly the same size. We've got about 3¼ inches. If yours is 3½ or more, you'll probably want to drop down a hook size, make it again, and see if that gets you closer to this gauge. Now, if you're counting or measuring something smaller, then you'll probably want to go up a hook size because your blanket and everything might end up too small overall. Now, we don't need to fasten off here, and you can actually leave your stitch marker for a minute. Chain 1, and then we'll rotate it so that you're looking at it like this. We'll crochet in these exposed loops. This stitch right here, we're not going to do anything with. In the next one, the back loop only, so the back as it sits away from you, make a single crochet. And in the next stitch, double crochet, again in that back loop only. And then just make a double crochet in the back loop of every single one of these exposed loops. So what we're doing with this here is exposing these sets of loops, and we'll actually use those later to turn the spiral into a square. When you reach your stitch marker, you can go ahead and remove that. Here is where we have to transition to the inner loops of the spiral. I like to sort of fold this down so that I can see these extra loops and double crochet. And as long as they're overlapping kind of like this, you're on the right track. Before you get too far ahead, the stitch that we skipped. So this is our first single crochet, this is our first double crochet, and right here is where we skipped. This open loop, go ahead and mark that with your stitch marker. That'll help us in the next step. The last one is always a little bit tricky to get your hook through. and simply pull up on that. Open it up so you can see your hole in the middle there, and run your needle down through it. Pull that nice and tight so it gives it a nice little spiral finish. And you can weave in this tail along the back side. So that is our spiral. Instead of crocheting one spiral at a time and turning that into a square, which you'll see next, I crocheted 7 spirals in the same contrast color, and then I turned all 7 of those into squares. So it was a little more efficient, kept me a little bit more interested and engaged. No matter how you choose to work it, you will have to turn this spiral into a square, and here's how you do that. So we need the main color for this. Stick your hook through that loop, and then we can pull the marker away. See the stitch that's directly next to this one here. Right there. We'll add our main color. So make your slip knot, place that on the hook, pull it through both of those loops. And I know this seems weird, but we're doing it because it makes it look a little bit neater in the long run. Then we'll chain 3. And we'll treble crochet next, but we want to do so in the same place. From here, chain 2. This here, what we're creating, is the corner of the first round of the squares. So wrap the yarn twice, put your hook through both of those loops again, pull up a loop. You'll just yarn over and pull through twice and leave those 2 there. Wrap it 2 more times, same stitch placement. Yarn over, pull through twice, and then we'll yarn over and pull through all 3. Okay, so that finishes the first corner, and it's smooth sailing from here. So in the next one, make a double crochet. And we need a total of 7 of these. So that was the first. So with this being the first corner of the square, we're going to start the second corner of the square here. So in this next loop, that's where we'll work the next corner stitches. Chain 2. Followed by a double crochet in the next 7 stitches. And then your corner pattern in the next stitch. Are you seeing the repeat here? Double crochet in the next 7. And don't worry if it looks really wonky, like that's totally going to happen. The next round will fix it. When you get to this point, you should have 6 open stitches here, and then we have 1 here. We'll make a double crochet in each of the 6. But we need to have 7, right? That's what we've done for the other sides, and it has to be even. So in order to make that even, we'll double crochet in this first one. Just the first one. Before we were using this plus the one down below. Find your first treble crochet of the round and make a slip stitch there. So in this chain 2 space here, slip stitch there as well. We really want our hook to be there to start off on this next round. Then we'll chain 5. Now this will count 3 of them will be a double crochet and 2 will be a chain 2 space. Make 3 double crochets in the same chain 2 space. We want to make a stitch there as well. And then we'll double crochet in each of the next 7 stitches. And in the chain 2 space here, the corner, our stitch pattern is 3 double crochets, chain 2, and 3 double crochets. So we'll repeat the same thing for these 2 sides. Another checkpoint too is to count the stitches that are along each long edge. You should have 15 there. So we're not really doing anything different on the last long edge here initially until we get to the end here. So remember, we need 15 stitches on each long edge of the square. That's actually really important as we move on to the chevron stitch pattern. And at the end here, you'll double crochet twice in this chain 2 space. And slip stitch to finish the round. I have a neat way that I like to finish my square so that it looks a lot neater here up in the corner. If you run your needle through one of the chain stitches from front to back, and then this is where we're focusing, run your needle down through the middle of, that's basically the last slip stitch that we made. Then see how it creates like an extra little chain. Just really tidies things up. You don't have to do that if you don't want to, but it really is a cool little trick, especially if you make a lot of granny squares. The blanket in total requires 28 spiral squares, and again, you can arrange the color however you like. I worked on 7 spirals of the same contrast color using 4 different colors. So that means I have 4 panels, if you will, that are each worked in a different contrast color. Now, one thing you might be wondering is, do I have to block these? And honestly, the straight answer is no, you really don't have to. You can if you want to. It's only going to make it look a little bit better, but we are on a time crunch. It's not a necessary step. The way you crochet them into the chevron panels, which you'll see next, actually hides and makes them look pretty even and pretty nice right out of the gate. So if it looks a little bit wonky and funky right now, it will get better when you turn them into your chevron panels. So the first 2 rows of the chevron pattern are worked in your main color, so get that ready, and your spiral squares. So make a slip knot with your main color yarn and put your hook through any of the corners, just through the chain 2 space. Then chain 2, then we'll double crochet 2 together using this double crochet and this one here. So yarn over, pull up a loop, pull through 2, leave these 2 here, And do that one more time for the next stitch. And then yarn over and pull through all 3. So this is going to be, if you can imagine a straight line, this is where the side of the blanket will be. Next, we'll double crochet in the next 13 stitches. You can choose to work over this tail as well. That way you don't have to weave it in later. And that gets you to the next corner, the next chain 2 space there, and you'll make 5 double crochet in this chain 2 space. So this is the peak, if you will, of our chevron. Now working down to the valley, we'll double crochet in the next 13 stitches. All right, so with that, it gets you to the last 2 double crochets, and this is actually my joining corner here. So 1 double crochet is the chain space. That may or may not be true for you, depending on, which corner you started in. From here, we need to double crochet 5 together, and that's going to finish this square, and it's going to join in our second square. So first of all, start off with your double crochet 5 together. So that's the first stitch. This is the second, and the corners, we'll treat them both as the third. So wrap the yarn over the hook, insert it through the chain 2 space, and then grab your other square, your next square, and put it through just like this. Yarn over, pull through 2. So now see, we have 1, 2, 3 out of 5. We'll find the next double crochet here on the next square. That'll be the 4th out of 5, and then the next double crochet is the 5th. So when we do that, just do a quick check. You should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 double crochets that are partially worked, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 loops on your hook. You'll yarn over and pull through all 6 loops. And that's how we get that really nice, sharp chevron, basically like a right angle chevron. From here, our repeat begins. We'll make a double crochet in the next 13 stitches. It's always a good idea to count, right? So you make sure that you're on the right track, but visual cues are also really good. So 13 stitches should get you up to your corner here. And remember, you'll make 5 double crochets in this chain 2 space, and this will be the next peak in our chevron. And 13 double crochets down to the next little valley. Once again, this first double crochet that's like right off of the corner is very easy to overlook, so make sure you're not forgetting that. It will throw off your stitch count, and it's not always easy to figure out what's gone wrong if something like that happens. Now once again, that leaves you with 2 double crochets in your corner, and we'll work that double crochet 5 together, starting with these 2 stitches. So that's the repeat for this section of the chevron. As we're adding our spirals together, we're doing so in this first row. Once you've added all 7 of your spiral squares, you'll work the pattern to the last corner here, leaving 2 double crochets, and then of course you've got your chain 2 space. We'll double crochet 3 together here.
And the third one, just work that through the chain 2 space, yarn over, pull through all 4 loops. Now, of course, yours will be more than twice this long, but this is generally what it should look like. The second row of the chevron pattern is even easier, if you ask me. What we'll do is chain 2. We'll turn this over. So the chain 2 is actually part of a double crochet 3 together, and that's why we don't want to work anything in this stitch right here. So instead, we'll double crochet 2 together using the next stitch over, and then the one after that. And so that combined is a double crochet 3 together using a chain. But from here, the pattern is basically the same as before. We just don't have the complicated bits of joining the squares together. So make a double crochet in the next 13 stitches. When you do that, the next stitch will be the middle of the 5 from the previous row. In there, you'll make 5 double crochets. And double crochet in the next 13 stitches. And remember, when you reach your little valley here, we'll double crochet 5 together. And our repeat begins. We have 13 double crochets, right? Then we have 5, 13, double crochet 5 together. And that's the general pattern for row 2 of the chevron. So at the end of the row here, you have your 13 double crochets, and that leaves 1, 2, 3 for our double crochet 3 together. So we just need 2 rows of our main color here to start out with, and then we're going to transition to 2 rows of our contrast color. I like to use the magic knot because it reduces the number of ends that I have to weave in. So you'll follow the same repeat, row number 2, with your contrast color for 2 rows. And then you'll switch back to your main color and work 2 more rows in the main color. The 2 rows of contrast color and the 2 additional rows of main color, they all follow the same row 2 repeat. So this is what one side of your chevron will look like. Of course, yours will be more than twice as long, but this is the general idea for the first half of the chevron. Now we get to do it all on the other side. So the row 2 repeat that we talked about, we're not changing anything there. And the row 1 repeat, once we flip this around, is very similar to the first row of our chevron. So nothing new here. Honestly, the only difference will be in our little valley section here. And that brings me to my chain 2 space. This is where we'll work the 5 double crochets. Start your double crochet 5 together with your first double crochet there, then the next one. And here's how to handle the corners here. Wrap the yarn around the hook and insert it through both chain 2 spaces. Then you'll finish your double crochet 5 together with this double crochet and the last one here. So then it looks like this. Now the rest of the repeat here you're already familiar with. You'll work your double crochet in the next 13 stitches. You'll work 5 here in the corner, 13 down, 5 double crochet or double crochet 5 together. When you have your 13 double crochets, that should leave 2 and then your chain 2 space here on the end. Remember, that's for your double crochet 3 together. And it's pretty smooth sailing from here. You'll work the same row 2 repeat on your chevron pattern, 1 more in your main color here, 2 in your contrast color, followed by 2 more of the main color. Now when you have one panel completed, you can either work on filler squares next, or you can create your other 3 panels, whatever works best for you. When you're ready to learn how to crochet the filler squares, that's what we'll look at next. The filler squares start off with your contrast color as well. You'll create your slip knot and chain 3. Then find your first chain, you'll join with a slip stitch there, and you'll get this little blob of yarn. If you pull the 2 edges apart, you can kind of see the center of the ring. I like to just stick my finger in there, and then we'll chain 5. In the center of the ring, you'll make 3 double crochets, then chain 2, 3 more double crochets, so after working that little repeat 3 times, that brings us back to the beginning. Now this chain 5 does count as a double crochet and then the 2 corner chains. So we have 1 double crochet here, we just need 2 more. And then join with a slip stitch to that chain 2 space. The second round starts with 5 chains. And you'll work 2 double crochets in the chain 2 space. This is part of the corner pattern, but it's a little broken up here at the beginning of the round. And then you'll work a double crochet in each of these 3 stitches. And that brings you to your corner, and our corner pattern is 2 double crochets, all in this chain 2 space, 2 chains, and you want to scrunch everything over, and 2 more double crochets. Make a double crochet in each of the next 3. So this is our repeat. and work your corner pattern. This first double crochet can sometimes get hidden under these 2 stitches, so you want to make sure you don't skip this guy. We still need a double crochet into each of these 3 stitches. The last one ends up being right here in our join, and that's because this first, or this double crochet, is technically a chain. We still need a stitch there though, and then we'll double crochet in this chain 2 space. So when you pair that double crochet with this double crochet that's actually a chain, you have the finish of the corner pattern. So we've got 2 double crochets, chain 2, and 2 double crochets. Now we're done with our contrast color in the filler square. We're ready to move on to our main color. And if you prefer to fasten off like normal, go ahead and do that. But I want to show you a little trick to reducing the number of ends you have to weave in. And this is a little thing called the magic knot. You'll pull up just slightly on that loop, and you'll trim the loop. Pull out the slip stitch and the last double crochet. That should give you enough to work with. And we'll tie the main color around the contrast color here. Then you'll take the tail of your contrast color and tie it around the main color. So you should have a main color knot and a contrast color knot, and when you pull the 2 ends, it'll slide them together, and if you give it a real good tug, that'll tighten it up, and you can safely trim these 2 ends completely off. Then just work those last couple of stitches again. We have a double crochet that we undid, and then we have a slip stitch. So the magic knot, it does create a little knot in your work, and that's why it's a payoff. Some people love it and some people hate it. You can use this if you want to save yourself a little bit of time, if you're comfortable with the magic knot, or if you prefer to weave them in, you can absolutely do that as well. I've never had this knot fail me before, so I feel pretty confident in it. So we have 2 more rounds in our main color, and they all follow the same general pattern. We'll start off with 5 chains. And remember, 3 of those are a double crochet and 2 is a chain 2. You'll work your same corner pattern, although here at the beginning it's a little different. You'll double crochet twice in the chain 2 space. And you'll make a double crochet into each of these stitches. And when you reach the corner, you'll work the same corner pattern. 2 double crochets, a chain 2, and 2 double crochets. All right, now on the last side here, we still need 7 double crochets along the edge here. We should have 7 to work into. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and remember 7 is our little chain here. Remember the 7th one goes right here where our join is. Then double crochet in the chain 2 space from the round below. And join with a slip stitch to your chain space there. So the 4th round follows the same general pattern that you're used to. You'll start with 5 chains, work 2 doubles in this chain 2 space. Now this time along the edge, instead of 7 double crochets, we have 11 here. So we need to work 11 double crochets. And the corner pattern for this round is the same. 2 double crochets, chain 2, and 2 double crochets. Same thing at the end of the round here. We've got our last double crochet kind of in our slip stitch. We'll work a double crochet in the chain 2 space and join with the slip stitch. Now, if you're counting, and you probably should be, we have 15 double crochets on each side. So it matches our spiral squares here. I like to fasten these off the same way that I did the spiral squares. We'll do a quick measure check on this one as well. These will be a little bit smaller than the others, about 4.5 inches.
If you are breaking up the pattern and you're not crocheting all of your squares first, here's what you'll need to join 2 panels together. Of course, you need 2 finished chevron panels, but you'll also need 6 filler squares and 2 half squares. You've already seen how to work the filler squares. The half squares, we'll see how to do next.
You'll use the main color for your half squares. Make your slip knot and chain 3. And just like we did with the filler squares, we'll join with the slip stitch to the 3rd chain. Pull that apart so you can see what you're working with. Then you'll chain 3, and in the center of the ring, make 3 double crochets. Chain 2, and then 4 double crochets. See how I'm kind of working over that tail? That'll help reduce the number of ends to weave in. So that's the first row of the half square. From here, we'll chain 3, which does count as a double crochet, and then we'll turn the work. Even though this counts as a double crochet, we're still going to double crochet in this first space here because we need to increase here. So we technically now have 2 double crochets in the first stitch, and then we'll double crochet once into the next 3. And for the corner pattern, we'll make 2 double crochets, a chain 2, and 2 double crochets. So that really hasn't changed from our filler square. And then just work everything in reverse. 1 double crochet in the next 3, and then we'll increase here at the end. So remember though, our first double crochet, or the last one here, is actually a chain 3. So we need to crochet 2 stitches in that top chain so that everything works out as it should. And for this row, we'll follow the same general trend. Chain 3, turn the work, double crochet in the first stitch here so we have an increase. Make 1 into all of these double crochets. We should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. and the corner pattern. A double crochet in the next 6. And 2 double crochets in your chain here at the end. Chain 3, turn, increase. Rows 4 and 5, we're following the same pattern generally, but we just have more double crochets here in between. And 2 double crochets in your top chain. Now the idea is for it to have a pretty straight edge here. It's not going to be perfectly straight, but as long as it's relatively straight like this, you're on the right track. We have just one more row to go. You'll chain 3, turn, double crochet in the first. So this time we actually have 16 stitches along these straight edges. It'll work out fine in the join. You'll see why later. But that's it for the half square. We can go ahead and fasten off. And of course, weave in these ends now so I don't have to deal with a bunch later.
So I mentioned blocking before, and you don't have to block any of your squares, but if you are going to block something, your half squares, that's where I would say is the best payoff. These have a tendency to be a little bit rounded on the edge and not truly straight and flat right off the hook. That's just part of it, and blocking can only help that, but you don't have to. Again, we can fix this and make it look neater in our border, which you'll see later. Now, when you're ready to join 2 of your chevron panels, here's how we do that. Starting with your bottom panel, what you'll want to do is get things a little bit organized so this joining process is a little easier. And I like to use these locking stitch markers to help with that. So what I'll do is grab just the chain 2 space of this half square and then find your group of 5. Locate the middle stitch, the 3rd one there, and just attach it like that. And then we want to count 15 stitches over because that's how many we have here. So we'll join to the one next to it. And if it makes it easier, it kind of does, you can throw this one in the mix too. And if you only have 2 stitch markers, you can just move them as you go. But if you do have more than that, you know, you can add as many as you want. Find the first double crochet of your half square and insert your hook through that as well. And we're going to join this with our main color. You could technically use one of your contrast colors if you want to, whatever looks good to you. So pull that through both of the stitches. We'll chain 1 just to secure the join. And it's so much easier now. If you can fold it like this, you can see the stitches that you're working. Single crochet using those same 2 stitches. That'll technically be the first join stitch here. And from here it's pretty simple. We'll make 1 single crochet for every stitch catching our panel and our filler square, both loops of both stitches, and single crochet. When you reach your point here, you can remove the marker. Still place our hook
through the double crochet there, but then we don't have a stitch on the square here, so we'll just go through the chain 2 space and single crochet. So we need to use the same double crochet that we have right here. So I'm going to put my hook through that same stitch and then catch the chain 2 space of my next square. When you reach your next little valley here, if you will, you can remove your stitch marker here. Use that stitch and the chain 2 space, and then keep going. When you've added all of your filler squares for this section and you've reached the end here, you'll grab another half square. You'll use that same middle stitch on your chevron panel and then the chain 2 space on your half square. And then of course, single crochet using both loops of the stitches on your half square and your panel squares, or panel stitches. You get what I'm trying to say. Now remember, the last stitch here on your half square will likely be a chain 3. So that's where your last stitch will take place. Then just fasten off and weave in those ends. Then you'll just slide in your other panel, and again, I like to use my stitch markers to hold everything in place. The joining process itself isn't any different than what we did down here. We just have one extra little thing to take care of in this area. So when you get down to your junction here, where all of this has to come together, this is what I do. So my next stitch, I would go through the chain 2 space here on the half square, but then I'm also going to work the hook under that middle stitch on this group of 5. We'll single crochet, okay, and then we're going to add a few extra stitches because it'll make it look a lot neater if we do. I like to work my hook roughly in the middle, but also underneath the single crochet row from this join here. And then back here on the other side, we need to use the same middle stitch. We still have this little side to deal with. Insert your hook through the chain 2 space on this filler square, and again through the same double crochet. It gets a little harder to see on this one. On your other chevron, so that same middle stitch and single crochet. So we've really made 3 single crochets kind of coming from that same one there, but in doing that we should still have the proper number of stitches here, and that's really all there is to it. You'll continue with a single crochet in every stitch on both sides, if I can get my yarn to stop splitting. And then of course when you get to your peak here, the top point of the chevron, I know, very technical terms here we're using. you'll treat it just like before. Insert your hook through the chain 2 space, and then also through your double crochet 5 together. And so there's really nothing new or fancy there, just the 1 stitch needed, and you'll keep going down the other side. You can fasten off we have a nice finished edge on the top and the bottom, right, with our chevron pattern, but things could be better along the edge here. We can clean this up a little bit, and we're going to do that with just a simple row of single crochets. So you'll want to situate yourself so that you can work on the long edge, whichever direction. You can start anywhere you like first. And I'm just going to say that this isn't an exact science. You're going to have to do a little bit of, I don't know, experimenting maybe? Is that the right word? I have my hook positioned here just in like what is the corner, even though it's not, you get what I mean. Chain 1, which again, I don't like to count that as a stitch, so I will also single crochet in the same place. So if this were an exact science, I would tell you evenly space such and such number of single crochet along the edge. In practice though, I am not a big fan of that type of instruction because it never seems to work out that way, and then you get fixated on having a specific number, and like it really just doesn't have to be that difficult. The goal is to make a solid row of single crochets to clean this edge up and make it look a little bit more finished. If you add too many single crochets, you might experience it kind of bubbling or waving. And if you have too few, it will kind of, shrink in and maybe pucker or that sort of thing. So my next stitch placement, I would probably go right about here or maybe even in a little bit. I also like to stick my hook through stitches whenever possible when doing like a cleaner edge like this. And you can kind of gauge where your next stitch needs to go based on how wide your stitches are. Like if I were to jump all the way over here and single crochet, for instance, that's clearing a lot of space, and see how it's pulling it together? We don't want that. So instead, I might put a single crochet through here, and then in that place where I had it before. Work a stitch and lay it out and look at it. If it looks even, like if it lays flat and even, I think you're good to just keep going. It's just so easy to pull a stitch out if you're unhappy with the placement. So work a few, take a look. That's laying nice and flat. It's pretty clean. I'm happy with that. When you come to your half squares, if you notice that it's kind of bulging out just a little bit and you want to hide that, you can do that with these stitches. Until now, I've been placing my stitches at pretty much the same level. Not right on the edge, but kind of in a little bit. Well, this time I might actually go in a little bit deeper. Like instead of putting it through the middle of the stitch, I might just wrap it around the entire stitch. And by doing that, we're covering more of the edge of this guy, and that hides the bulge out a little bit that we see. I know, again, highly technical terms here.
See, I mean, you can just do so much by just working these stitches in even more. And since you're using the same main color, you can't even tell where they are. It's like magic. Now, of course, we'll fasten off and weave in the ends. And there's just one more side to go. Of course, you'll want to rotate it and do this all again on the opposite side. Now remember, in order to complete the challenge, you have to have your blanket finished and sent in to Warm Up America by March 20th. Now that's the postmark date. Just make sure you drop it off at the post office by the 20th, and that will be counted towards all of the blankets that we've sent in from this challenge. You must include a form with your blanket, and it must be filled out. You can either print this directly, you can download it directly from the challenge homepage, and fill this out completely, include it in your package, and that way Warm Up America knows who it's from and what it's for. But if you don't have a printer, you don't have to worry about that. You can just handwrite the information on a piece of paper and include that in your package as well. If you want to wash your blanket before you send it in, you can absolutely do that. Just make sure it's completely dry before you send it in. And here's another really big question. What happens if you can't finish on time? Look, I completely understand. Life happens. This is a big project and it's a big undertaking, but they'll be happy to receive it any time of year whenever you get it ready. I'm sure you have more questions than this. I have a bunch of those answered on the challenge homepage. If you don't find your answer there, leave your questions in the comments below. I'll do my best to answer them as quickly as I possibly can. And thank you. I appreciate you so much, the time, everything that you've invested into this project. I know it's a big undertaking, but I am so grateful. Warm Up America is so grateful. And the child who receives your blanket is just going to be so incredibly excited to have a handmade gift from a complete stranger. Happy hooking, and I'll see you in the next one.